I invite the panelists for our next panel to come up. Thanks again to Federica and the audience. I want to invite folks, we have a full house here, and we have a lot of seats at the front. So especially for folks standing at the back, I really encourage you to move forward.
Realize now.
Yes.
A1. I remember the different currencies as well. Oh, on Micah Ruskelt.
As our panelists make it onto the stage, anyone at the back, I really encourage you to come sit up front. We have a lot of empty seats here, and it's a lot more comfortable than standing at the back for the entire panel.
Would you like some water? Was my question.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
great. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here to celebrate the start of the Irish presidency. My name is Peter Schaefer. I'm one of the reporters at the magazine. I'm primarily covering tech policy, but a wide array of other topics as well. The theme for this second panel is simplifying Europe's digital rulebook. I want to remind everyone that this event is on the record as well. For years, as we discussed in our earlier panel, we've been talking about simplification. That's also for digital rules as well, though. Typically, we have a perception that nothing is happening in this space. The Draghi report is not being implemented. It's constantly being discussed that Europe is as slow and bureaucratic as ever. However, that's actually not always true. Last week, the Institute Montaigne came out with a very interesting report that showed that actually 30% of Draghi's recommendations had already been implemented, and that that rate could reach as high as 60% next year. So perhaps simplifying Europe's digital rulebook, the theme of our panel today, is happening faster than we think, but of course we can discuss this further. Of course, it's not just about simplification and deregulation, but it's also about making sure that the very fast-moving digital world is aligning with some of Europe's values and priorities as well. And of course, there's many very specific and important pieces of regulation that I hope we can talk about today, especially this summer is really shaping up to be a really critical summer in EU tech policy. We saw some simplifications of the EU AI Act in May, questions about the enforcement of the DMA, privacy protections. We should have some more news about an expert panel on social media recommendations to Ursula von der Leyen on July 13th. And then GPAI models will finally be enforced and regulated under the EU AI Act at the very beginning of August. And then, of course, we'll discuss as well the Digital Fairness Act, which we should see a more concrete proposal at the end of the year. For these very interesting and important topics, we have a great panel here for you. Let me introduce them. We have MEP Cynthia Nivercu from Renew in Ireland, who you saw earlier this morning as well. From the Commission, we have Maria Merto Cornelipoulou, the Head of Unit for Consumer Law at DG Just. We also have Claire Colleran-Malloy, a member with Ireland for the European Committee of the Regions, furthest from me. And then we have Maria Berdos, the SVP and Chief Legal and Public Affairs Officer at Booking.com. Thank you all for making it to our panel today. I want to start with a very simple question for all of our panelists. Please just a minute or so answer, just so we can all see where we fall on this question of digital regulation. Very simple. Does the EU need more digital rules or less, and why? Cynthia, maybe we can start with you.
I don't believe we need more regulation at this point. That's a very political answer, sitting on the fence. But we do have very robust legislation already. You've cited them all. There are teeth. There are sanctions contained in those pieces of legislation. So we need to use them in a measured way, in a proportionate way, not like some of the decisions we saw recently on the other side of the pond and Trump invoking the Supreme Court to make yet another rollback decision in relation to democratic rights. But I do think we have enough legislation at the moment. We need to deploy it.
Okay. Maria?
Similar answer. For me is not more or less, but when. So let the dust settle. Let's see the impact of what's out there, and then we reassess.
From my side, I will answer a neither-or question, as usually we do, with yes, both. We need both less rules and more rules, and there is not a contradiction between that. The Commission, and you cited, Peter, many of the efforts that we are doing to take a critical look at what is already on the table, simplify our legislation through omnibus proposals, but we are also conscious of our responsibility to keep the rules that are in place fit for purpose. The Digital Fairness Act that my unit is responsible for, that Commissioner McGrath is responsible for, before, is a typical example of that. We are not adding layers. What we want to do is make sure our rules are fit for purpose and use the opportunity of new lawmaking also to make rules simpler and leaner when we can.
It's interesting. Thank you for the questions. I'm delighted to be here representing Ireland as a member of the Committee of the Regions, representing local government. And you mentioned fit for purpose. I would use another word. I would use whatever simplification we're doing must actually work in practice, in implementation. And whether we have enough rules or not, I'm not going to answer that question. But if the rules are such that we're not making it easily usable by the public and easily implementable in practice, then we do need to hone in on those rules.
Great, so hopefully we can get more into some of the specifics, but that outlines some of the contours of our discussion today. For the first question, I want to go back to you, Cynthia, on this. Obviously, we're here to discuss the Irish presidency, which started yesterday. Ireland obviously has some very close ties to big tech. Many US big tech firms have their offices in Ireland. I've talked to some people, read some reports that perhaps could be a concern for playing a major role in regulating technology as well. Is that a concern that you have, these ties between Ireland and many US big tech firms?
Not a huge concern from the government point of view, because if you look at the huge automobile industry, the car industry in Germany of old, say, or even today, still, albeit going through difficulties, of course, every country is going to have a strength, or many strengths, in relation to a certain industry. We happen to have a strength in relation to the tech industry. It doesn't mean that we somehow are less neutral when it comes to rolling out some of these laws, implementing some of these laws. We have a very robust commission of man, the Media Commission, the regulator, that was set up in the last number of years in Ireland. They have a very large team. I've met them. I've met the commissioners. They're very focused on their role, irrespective of what tech giants and how many tech giants are located with their Dublin offices or their European offices in our capital city in Dublin, because they understand that this regulation role is shared right throughout all of the countries in Europe. And what we want to see is more integration between the regulators, because, again, I go back to that phrase, unity with strength. We have to approach this whole issue about the tech giants and regulation and so forth, not just for minors, but for businesses, consumers, everybody that uses tech. We need to approach it together. And I'm very pleased that the leader of my party and Claire's party, delighted that Claire is on the podium here, because local government is so important, not just in Ireland, but throughout the European Union, again, in terms of defending democracy. But I'm delighted to see that our leader, Micheál Martin, the Prime Minister, has said that he would like to see the EU 27 moving together on the issue of safety for minors online. To date, we've seen an awful lot of a rollout from different countries, and rightly so. Every sovereign state is entitled to draft legislation and propose legislation. And they're talking about bans, Peter. I just want to specifically say that there's legislation being rolled out about bans. I won't go down a sidetrack to say why I don't think bans simpliciter work on their own. But what I do want to say is it's fine to have these disparate pieces and fragmented pieces of legislation, but it's not so fine if we don't bring them all together and unify with regards to dealing with the tech giants.
And I think we can circle back to the social media point a little bit later in the conversation too. It's definitely something I've been following closely, and I'm interested to see how this proceeds in the next few months. Mirto, I want to go to you next. I mentioned in my intro remarks the Digital Fairness Act is a very important piece of legislation that the Commission is working on right now. You've been deeply involved in this. We're expecting it in the fourth quarter of 2026, or perhaps sometime earlier. It's still a bit unclear. It's meant to deal with addictive design for children, but of course also for adults in our digital technologies. Does the DFA help with simplification? Does the EU even need the DFA? Can you make your case there?
Very happily. So yes, the EU needs a DFA, and this is not an ideological point of making. It's a fact-based analysis that we have been conducting over several years. It started with a thorough digital fairness fitness check of our existing consumer protection legislation on unfair commercial practices, consumer rights, unfair conduct terms, and so on. What we realized is that this legislation remains very valid also in the digital space. space. It's horizontal rules that apply to all types of traders that are active online, that provide digital products and services to consumers, as well as offline. And whereas this legislation remains very useful, there are some very clear gaps that this analysis put forward. And the need for the DFA is precisely there to address these gaps in a targeted manner. I'm talking about dark patterns, so interface designs that mislead consumers into making choices that they otherwise would not. You mentioned the so-called addictive design or attention maximizing features as we view them. We also look at spending maximizing features, unfair personalization, common subscription traps, unfair pricing practices, so an array of issues where our current rules fall a little bit short of what consumers rightly expect and don't enable our enforcers, the national authorities, also to apply these rules in concrete cases in the digital environment, because it was mentioned already, and I want to make that very clear, that we have rules in place that need to be actively enforced. We don't look to add layers to that. We look at making our rules clearer and also simpler, as you mentioned, to allow better enforcement and to help law-abiding traders face up to the competition by those who do not play by the rules. One word on simplification, since you asked me deliberately, specifically about that. Yes, there is room for simplification. We want to make the DFA also a pro-business initiative. We have taken a look, for example, in the area of online media services and the exercise of the right of withdrawal, whether that can be simplified. We are also looking critically on some information requirements that stem from our horizontal consumer law and may not always be necessary to the extent currently laid out. For example, in the case of repeat in-app purchases, perhaps you don't need to overload consumers with information. So these are just examples, but very happy to elaborate further on in the discussion. Also on the issue of protection of minors, because there as well we see a role for the DFA.
Great, and I really want to circle back to that question because I know it's going to be very important how the EU moves on that this summer. But sticking on the DFA, Maria, I want to go to you next. I know in some of our discussions before, you perhaps feel a little bit differently about the DFA and its role here. Many in the tech community have argued that this is not needed at all. Do you think the EU needs the Digital Fairness Act? What would be your argument against it, perhaps?
So I respect the work and I respect the policy objective on all of this, and it's difficult to comment on whether you're pro or against a regulation if you haven't seen the draft.
Yeah.
I hear the gossip and what people say, but so what my ask would be is really that is risk-based and targeted. I also see more generally the CPC regulation as being an important way of getting enforcement right, consistent, and no duplication. That's what I think would help businesses. And then just to double click on the concerns I have on the DFA, we like to talk about double clicking and booking. Double click on those concerns. I want to just mention a few of my concerns of unintended consequences of the DFA, because we speak about tech industry as if it was one industry, but actually compared to other industries, it encompasses a lot of different business models, right? You have subscription model, you have advertising, you have social media. It's completely different. And when you regulate an industry that I would argue is already highly regulated, that it has very different business models, you can fall into traps and have unintended consequences. So I want to give 3 areas of concern. One is, for example, endless scrolling. I understand why you are concerned about addictive behavior, but for example, at Booking.com, if someone doesn't find the hotel that they want, they are also doing endless scrolling in the sense that it keeps going. But it's not our intention. We actually want people in and out as fast as possible, and we are a low-frequency app for most people. People are not using it many times a day. I wish that people could travel so much, but that's not the reality. The second point is in relation to futures rewarding engagement. Again, I completely understand that you want to control that, and again, addictive behavior around it. But thinking about loyalty programs and legitimate loyalty programs that can be beneficial to customers and consumers, I would caution not to have rules that would prevent this from growing, because it's also an area of business that is growing in travel and in other places. And then you mentioned the third one, so I think this is top of your mind as well, is the transparency requirements around dynamic pricing and personalization, AI use. I understand, but be careful that we don't overload the consumer with so much information that we get into the issues that we had with cookie fatigue and people not reading privacy notices, right? And things like that. So let's keep it, to the most critical points. Those would be my examples.
Great. It's great to ground in some concrete examples, some of that debate around the DFA. Clara, I want to go to you next. I know you're working with the Committee of the Regions, especially on implementing so much of what we're talking about here at the local level. How can the EU make it easier for cities and regions to implement some of this digital regulation we're talking about here? I'm curious if you have some concrete examples.
I do indeed, and thank you very much. And it's going right back to my opening comment, which is, does it work on the ground? Does it work for people, users? And thankfully, I did do a little research, and my county council in Ireland is County Clare, located, if you've been to Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland, centre mid-west coast of Ireland. So, as you know, local councils provide housing, social housing, throughout Europe, and in County Clare it's no different. And we have a housing stock, and that housing stock is getting older. And so in Ireland we have a system where the inspections and the remediation of these properties is now done by way of it's all saved in a digital format. So the housing stock has been inspected, and we can rank the priority of addressing that based on real-time data that's been collected on the ground. The other example is how the engineers in our county assess the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges. That's all done by way of what they call the Information System, GIS system. It involves the mapping technologically of the whole county, so that the engineers have real-time data. If a query comes in by way of me, the councillor, or by way of a public inquiry, an engineer can be at his desk or on his phone, and he can immediately assess what's going on the ground. That is not Google mapping, that is actually our own local authority mapping system. And there's very a good example of simplifying the use of technology to get immediate redress and remediation of an issue that might be pertaining on the ground. The other is in HR, human resources. So when I first joined the council, I was first elected to the council in County Clare, Ireland in 2014. And back then, I do recall paper applications for job opportunities. That is all now online, and that's only a matter of 12 years. So we are we're slowly but surely making it necessary for just about anybody to be tech savvy. And one thing, Peter, I want to get onto, I don't know if you want me to do it now, is the importance of not leaving people out, not leaving a certain cohort of the population out, which I think is still happening, and it's not just in Ireland, it's elsewhere, but we're making efforts in Ireland to make sure that that is limited. The final area was in allocation of housing. So I talked about the housing stock, how we need to maintain it, how it's an ongoing battle to ensure that it's of the proper standard, but it's the allocation of those houses to people that are deserving and that qualify. Again, when I was first elected, that was not online, it was not simplified. Now, when a house comes available, the council let the people that are qualified for that house in the county, because it's county by county, it's all local government allocating housing. And that means it's open, transparent for all to see. The house is available. You have 1 week to allocate or express your interest online. Doesn't mean you're going to get allocated the house. And indeed, you can see how many people are vying for that house online. It's totally open and transparent. So that's been a really positive improvement in the rollout of simplified technology and digitalisation in County Clare that I gladly can share with you.
Great. It's great to get some very concrete, positive examples of that happening at the local level. I feel so often in the discussions we're having here in Brussels, it's sometimes tough to see how they're directly implemented in the member states. So that's great to get that perspective. I want to circle now back to you, Cynthia, but I know other panelists will want to weigh in on this very important issue, which is social media and how the EU may be regulating it. Over the course of the Irish presidency, over the next 6 months, we could see some major movements of the EU. As I mentioned, on July 13th, the Committee of Experts is going to give recommendations. The Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And actually, there were reports that came out this morning that she may be prepared to announce some sort of ban in the State of the Union address in September, which was reported this morning. Simply put, do you think the European Union should regulate social media for minors? If so, how?
Yeah, as I said earlier, on Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, as President now of the Council, he has said, and this is in the lead up to the background you've just given from President von der Leyen, he has said that he would like to see the EU 27 moving together. I agree with that because I think this issue of tech is so vast, it's so huge, and can we introduce the AI initials, and can we just say that's moving at a pace as well? So it's really important that we don't go down into fragmented 27 different rabbit holes. I do think we should try and unite. I would like to see it moving. I do think something will come during this Irish presidency. I've no sneak preview for you or exclusive for you, but I do think the mood music, the political nuances at the moment are heading in that direction. I think that would be good for Europe to take the lead on that. Just to go back to a couple of points, if you don't mind, in relation to Booking.com and industry and businesses who are offering a service to consumers, your sentiment and your statement is so correct. One size doesn't fit all, and unintended consequences can arise. Tech has been so beneficial on the ground in the municipal council, the local county council. Of course we want tech. The issue of minors is a separate issue, social media, and no doubt we'll come to it. But could I just say, in relation to the committee that I sit on, IMCO, this week now I've been meeting with hoteliers who obviously rely on Booking.com. And just to add to the conversation, and I suppose to introduce a little balance, what they would say with Booking.com, which has been revolutionary from the point of view of their business, is that at this stage now, it looks like it's a gatekeeper in the sense that they may not be able to get their offering to the forefront. They had Google and they have Booking.com, and now they have AI to deal with. So it's very difficult for the local country hotel. Let's keep it real. Let's go to West Cork. Let's go to a lovely family-run hotel that I stay in called Rolf's Country House Hotel, run by a family of people in regional Ireland. And of course, they have suppliers giving them fish and giving them fresh bread, and they have a whole ecosystem, and they have activities that they recommend people to do in the area, whether it's taking boat trips or going to see the dolphins. But my point is, very difficult now for Rolf's family-run country house hotel to get visibility. Of course, Booking.com has been a benefit, but there's also a slightly other side to that, and I know we'll get onto the Digital Markets Act, but that's some of the work that I've been looking at in terms of the Digital Markets Act. But I know that Booking.com are aware of this, as are other so-called gatekeepers and so forth. It's about a balance, because we want consumers and businesses at the end of the day to do well.
Yeah, and I would argue that we have helped also prices going down for consumers, because as you said, when with job applications you would have paper, it was the same. You would get, I remember doing that, getting a guide and calling each hotel and getting very confused that the price that was given to me on the phone was different from what was in the guide. That time is over, right? It's not happening so much anymore. And with that, we are bringing incremental businesses to them and also helping deal with seasonality, because when it's summer here, is winter somewhere else.
Yeah.
And our idea is to bring bookers that they wouldn't have had access to it before. And it's true, we are captured as a gatekeeper under the DMA. We don't reject that. We didn't fight it. We are implementing it. It's a lot of work, but we are doing it. I think what we don't want people to lose their, going back to my initial point, is that different business model, and we are much, much smaller than the other companies that are being captured, and we are a success story of European business, Dutch startup, where we have our R&D.
To circle back more to the DMA in just a moment, but just to give the other panelists a few questions here, but it's great to ground these kinds of conversations, very concrete examples in Ireland, which I'm enjoying. Going to you next, Mirto. Obviously, we just discussed earlier the DFA, the social media context as well. It's interesting for me as a reporter following this, how the DFA and the possibility of social media regulation could interface. Of course, we don't know what the Commission or Ursula von der Leyen has chosen here. But I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about how these two things could interface. You know, we talked about addictive design, which obviously in the social media context is very important. Could a ban, for example, be included within the Digital Fairness Act if that's the choice the Commission goes down? Is the Digital Fairness Act doing something different? How do these two pieces, two policy levers, work together?
Very happy to share what I am able to share at this stage, Peter, but would you allow me 30 seconds just to respond to the points previously made? First of all, to say that we fully agree that horizontal legislation does not mean one-size-fits-all legislation. And another thing I want to dispel is that when we are talking, we are looking into this issue, we are looking into measures to address this problem, we are automatically talking about prohibiting something. I think this is a common misconception. So we have an impact assessment that is looking into an array of options, from self-regulation to possibilities of giving consumers more control over certain features online, to certain prohibitions that may, however, be targeted to indeed the more harmful cases, cases concerning, for example, vulnerable consumers, minors as consumers, and so on. So there is, let's say, a very conscious effort on our side to calibrate the measures to the actual risk posed by the problematic practices that I mentioned. And I also want to refer to the CPC regulation review, Consumer Protection Cooperation regulation review, to say that indeed we are progressing in parallel on the substantive and the enforcement track. We know that there are problems that can be solved simply by strengthening enforcement, streamlining procedures, and so on. So these are, let's say, two sides of the same coin for us. Coming now to the protection of minors. I mentioned before that we see a role for the Digital Fairness Act as a consumer protection instrument in this regard. Minors are vulnerable consumers. We know that some of the practices that I mentioned disproportionately affect them. So we are assessing in each area, including addictive design, maximizing features, and so on, whether stricter rules, protections are needed for minors. Now, of course, this is part of a broader conversation right now, as you mentioned. Protection of minors is a horizontal priority. The work of the special panel has provided us with a wealth of inputs from experts and stakeholders, and they are supposed to present their recommendations to the President on the 13th of July. Building on these recommendations, we will design the way forward. I believe the President herself has referred to the reflection that is ongoing on a possible social media delay. And our responsibility then within the services is see how we follow up on the choices that will be made based on the panel's recommendation in a way that different instruments work together. So I think another element that is very important is that we want to build a European approach. The President has been very clear on that, so not to replicate any model out there, but really see how we can provide a comprehensive protection to minors, included when it comes to age-appropriate designs for the services that are available to them. So that is where I see clearly a role for the Digital Fairness Act in terms of designing services, clarifying elements that make services appropriate for young consumers as well.
Great. And I want to circle back to this because I know other people have some thoughts on the DMA as well. But I want to go to you again, Claire. Briefly, we were talking earlier about Ireland and some of the ways in which this digital regulation is implemented there. But it's also important to make sure that this kind of information and these kinds of regulations are easy for people to understand. You had mentioned a little bit in your remarks about making sure this is age appropriate for people who perhaps don't use this kind of technology as frequently younger people. Can you say a bit about that?
I don't know, Peter, if I'd say age appropriate. It's that's really different issue. It's whether certain people of a certain age are open to it and willing to learn how to access it. So, but going back to age appropriate, I'm glad that we may indeed have an announcement that would be a uniform European Union regulation or law dealing with social media and protection of minors. We know it's clear that parental guidance and parental efforts alone will not suffice. We need, and the only thing I would like to say before I respond to your specific question there is that I would absolutely like to think that we are a union, we are the European Union, and whatever new laws come about will be uniformly enforced in the European Union. And it goes back to your opening question to Cynthia, where yes, it's true that Ireland has a huge concentration of tech investment in Ireland. that shouldn't mean that Ireland is vulnerable to their particular canvassing or lobbying, because Ireland is part of the European Union. So it's a European Union effort that would regulate wherever they are, whether it be Ireland or whether it be Belgium. So going back to your question, though, it's something I'm concerned about, because even my own husband, and he's not that old, but he kind of adverse. He'll do the minimum he has to do. I have to do everything else, like booking.com. You know, I have
That's
to do
very
it all.
common, just so you know. You're not alone.
I don't know. I think men decide in this area their deliberately and planned incompetence is their skilled approach. They'll just let the woman do it all. But anyway, no offense to you lovely men in the audience. But my husband he's just 63. But imagine you're 73 or 83 or even 93, because we are all living longer. And if you feel that, oh, that's over there and I don't know about that, that's not good. That actually affects your sense of belonging to a community, to a democracy and whatever. So I did decide to go back and do a little bit of research further to your advance notice, Peter. And I'm very glad to say that in Ireland there's a very good concrete example of how the government ensured that an individual, no matter what age, but many times they are older, that is, let's say, not willing to embrace the technology will not be left behind. So in Ireland we had and Cynthia can add to this if she wishes, we had a terrible case of housing and buildings being built which with blocks that were ultimately defective. They had pyrite in the blocks, and it meant the buildings were going to fall down in time. These are people's homes. These people are distraught because their homes are crumbling underneath them. The government had to come in and help. We had to then announce it took a while, it took a long while, but they were a very successful lobby of injured people. And we couldn't get redress from the block makers, so the government has to step in, and they do step in. And it's a very lucrative, not lucrative, but it's a very generous defective block scheme. The reason why I'm mentioning it, though, is that in many cases the people would not, it's entirely online, first and foremost, the application for these funds, entirely online. So if you're not willing to embrace that technology, you're left behind. So that's why the government ensured that there are designated people that will assist at local level by way of the National Department of Housing. That's a very concrete example where they literally come in and help you fill in the digital information that's required to claim that grant. And another comment that was made by the digital person at my county council is advise the audience and the panel today that in Ireland, under the Local Government Management Agency or Association, they apply, and we all are familiar with this, the Ryanair test. And by that I mean, I don't think there's anybody in this room that hasn't gone on to the Ryanair app to buy a ticket. To help the Ryanair economy and the Michael O'Leary and the Irish economy, of course. No, I'm just saying that it's a very simple process. And it's intuitive. You go from one step to the next till you get to the final outcome. That is the approach they've used in the rollout of technology in Ireland under the Local Government Management Agency. So it's a very pragmatic, systematic approach where they're doing their best to not leave people behind, which is my concern with the digital economy, which we cannot avoid now at all in any way, shape or form.
Now, I know there's so many other topics that we'd like to weigh in on here, but I want to be aware of the time. We have around 5 minutes left. Before I go to a closing question for all the panelists, I want to go to our audience to see if we have any questions. Yes?
Okay. So my name is Robin. I'm a director at FedMA, Federation of European Data and Marketing. My question, thank you, is about the other side of the digital rule book is it doesn't matter how much we legislate, if we simplify and so on, if it's not enforced in a harmonized way across member states, it doesn't really matter. So what are your thoughts on 27 countries, 27 data protection authorities times 18 in Germany? And then that's for legislation, for regulation, for an act, whether it's the DFA, whether it's the GDPR. What about directives? Isn't it time to really take out the e-privacy, to keep the aspects that matter, put them in sector-specific legislations like electronic communications, the Digital Networks Act, the GDPR, and so on, but to really get rid of directives which are even more hard to enforce across member states? Thank you.
Would any of our panelists like to weigh in on that?
I can answer just very briefly politically, and maybe Maria from the Commission can deal with that. But politically, it will be difficult because, as you know, every sovereign state wants to have its own sovereign law and so forth. From a practical point of view and a logical point of view, it does make sense. But obviously, We have different interpretations of law, sometimes different legal systems as well. But yes, I would like to see far more coordination. Now, I do understand from the Commission Imán, the Media Commission in Ireland, that they do have quite a bit of coordination, but lots more to be done. You're quite right. We're back to that one Europe, one market, fragmentation, EU 28, exactly. Yeah, we need to focus on that now in the new geopolitical situation.
Anyone else on the panel would like to weigh in on that?
Just reiterate what's been said. I kind of said it in my remarks beforehand. We need to have a unified approach on this. It's not easy in practice, but we have to strive for that.
I would just add that it's already difficult within the data privacy authorities, but also there is overlap between consumer authorities and data privacy and even DSA coordinators. So it's also about breaking silos, in my view, to help with that.
From my side, I can only say that the Commission is very aware of that. I think there is a very conscious effort also in follow-up to the Letta and Draghi reports. There was a commitment amongst the institutions to consider more going in the direction of more harmonization regulations when that is possible. In the area of consumer law, on one hand, we feel that updating substantive legislation, and I mentioned what we are trying to do with the DFA, first of all, avoids the risk of fragmentation in areas where we see member states starting to adopt diverging approaches, for example, in the cancellation of contracts on influencer marketing and so on. On the other hand, we have a parallel process ongoing on the revision of the Consumer Protection Cooperation Regulation, where part of the effort is precisely to look into whether certain high-profile cases should be centralized, streamlined at the EU level when it comes to enforcement. So yes, the fundamental point, I think, is one we can agree on.
And it's not all just talking about it, Robin. I mean, the digital wallet, you know, has been voted on. We're moving on with it. So if I form a company in Dublin tomorrow and I get a unique number, I will be able to deal and buy and sell and whatever, trade with that unique number. That's really important. Yeah, we need more of that.
Thanks for that first question. We might have time for one more question here. Yes?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Ali Dunhill from Eurochild, and I'm interested in your comments regarding minors online in the digital environment. And I would like to know the panel's thoughts on platforms being held accountable and how safe by design legislation and implementation could be put in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. I absolutely want to support safety by design. I want to endorse what Maria has said from the Commission about a holistic approach. I want to put it on the record, as I've done several times. I don't believe in bans simpliciter, that they will do the job. I believe they let the tech giants off the hook. And if you take an example, let's move away from the minors. Let's take tech glasses, smart glasses now, and we know that they are recording people surreptitiously, secretly, without their consent. So again, in order to eradicate that, they're obviously uploading it online and selling it and monetizing and profiting in a similar way with young people because of the algorithms and so forth. But we need to look to the companies, look at the design and change that. But we also, if they breach that, then we need to bring in sanctions against them. And if we don't have the rules, there need to be rules. So it's a holistic approach. I think it's a very political buzzword at the moment for various leaders and governments to say, ban under 16, ban under 13, bang, bang, it'll be solved. It won't. That's why the Commission is right with the holistic approach.
Anyone else on the panel like to weigh in on that briefly?
Well, I would only repeat that indeed, from the Commission side, the protection of minors is currently a top priority. We are not simply waiting for new legislation. We have powerful tools in place. Yeah. You mentioned holding platforms into account. We have the framework of the Digital Services Act that includes Article 28 on the protection of minors. The Commission has issued very detailed guidelines that are an enforcement benchmarks. Our colleagues in DG Connect are doing very actively work in this regard. And at the same time, of course, we are eagerly awaiting, as I said, the recommendations of the special panel. what type, what form the follow-up will take, this is genuinely, I think, an open decision at the moment for the President to make, but we are listening to all the views that are out there, and we are aiming for a holistic approach that leaves no loopholes.
And sorry, if I may mention an initiative which you probably know about in Greystones in Ireland, let's keep it local again, but it takes a village, just look it up, it takes a village.ie or whatever, but it's basically 6 schools that came together, 6 primary schools, all the principals, all the parents, all the guardians, all the invested stakeholders, and they said, no phones for the children. Now, they happen to be in primary school, which goes up to about 12, 13, so there was huge buy-in, but it's a community initiative with the consent of people, with a positive campaign, you can achieve a lot. So it's not always about laws and designs and, you know, the company versus the regulators and the legislators. You involve the community, and as Claire said, education, 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 very important. Our children are very tech-savvy, by the way, and they're smarter than we think, and they need to be involved in the decision as well about a ban. If there is a ban as part of the suite of measures, they need to be involved as well.
Thank you for the question. I promised our panelists a very brief last question, which is, we're talking about a lot of different pieces of digital regulation here, but everyone has favorites. And I know we all love digital regulation up on this panel, or talking about what the EU is doing in the digital space. Could we quickly just go down the line and talk about one piece of digital regulation, perhaps something we haven't talked about right now that you want the audience to know about? Very briefly, Cynthia.
Yes, well, I think I mentioned about the smart glasses because this is a new phenomena and that has come to the fore. Privacy has always been a central key point for me because I was a barrister and I operated within the family law courts, so I was bound by a thing called the in-camera rule, which meant that nobody got in except the parties themselves and their legal teams, and obviously privacy was at a huge height. So GDPR always present in my mind, and I think the privacy of our citizens of Europe should never be under attack, as we do see it in certain instances, and I've cited a few, as it is now. So GDPR and privacy laws, I'm very keen to see that they are not only supported and supplemented if they need to be, but that again, the sanctions will be rolled out.
Great, thank you. Maria, briefly?
I just wanted to go back to one of the things that I think is important. Regulation will always lag behind tech development.
Yeah.
Right, we are still discussing Google self-preferencing that you referred to, and now it's almost getting moved by AI mode and AI overview, right? So knowing that, what should Europe do differently? And I do think I'm a big proponent that there's more principle-based regulations, more discussions between private parties and government outside of the context of an investigation, and more transparency as well of what has been the decisions and interpretations from the regulators, because that really can help companies comply. In terms of regulations, I would say that the regulation that is top of my mind at the moment is the financial data access regulation, and where there is a ban on gatekeeper. And I understand where that's coming from. At least I have my suspicions. But again, going back to unintended consequence, with that, it could prevent Booking from innovating on the embedded financial products that would be beneficial to hoteliers and to Booking.com and to our customers. And this is one area where, as we talk about European competitiveness, I think we have to be very mindful of.
Mirta?
For me, I would like the audience to retain the role of the DFA as a piece of a bigger puzzle. I think I have very often the impression that it's either, somebody said in a meeting, it's the room of requirements. You go in and everybody expects the DFA is going to solve all these kinds of problems. You just wish. But I want to say there is a value in synergies amongst our legislation. We have a strong framework on platforms through the Digital Services Act. We have an AI Act that already regulates many aspects of AI. Our purpose here is not to duplicate. Our purpose is to provide the minimum level of rules applicable to all types of traders, online and offline. And I think there is a lot of value in that, and we hope that we can continue to engage with everyone to get the balance just right.
I'll be very brief because I know you're under pressure. I just want to say what you've said is so true. Regulations can never keep up with the innovation. And I suppose looking at it from a perspective of a non-European Union person, having spent many years in the United States, their approach is so completely different. And my concern is that we're overly reliant on their technology. There are efforts underway now for us to create our own, move off those platforms. Indeed, I was listening to a radio show the other day where they're talking about the creation of free AI, which would undermine their whole model, which is underway in Europe. That's a broader discussion, but it's something I think we need to remain committed to.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists and a lovely panel.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to the audience as well, especially for a few very sharp questions. Please engage on social media with different parts of the panel. I'm here to encourage you to do that. We'll have a networking break for the next 30 minutes, just out here to your right. And our next panel will begin around 11:30. So please come back to take your seats around 11:25. Thank you so much.
Can we get